Using that metric of would I go for a beer review is just a terrible metric or a terrible thing for building a team. You know, it's just not the right way of going about things.
I've been in New York most of my life, 20 some odd years. I remember when Dead Rapid opened, and just to see what you've done now from transitioning from just a incredible bartender to, just all the entrepreneurial stuff you're doing is pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're just trying our best.
Yeah. Well, good to meet you, by the way, because we haven't met.
Yes, you too.
Yeah, we still haven't met in person, but at least we're doing remote here.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've done a bunch of podcasts already, so we're not going to talk about most of the things that you've already gone over. You got a pretty killer background. I think you started at Merchant Hotel like many, many eons ago. Is that right?
Yeah, that's where I started the cocktail side of things.
Yeah. And then Milk and Honey, and then I think you won Best Bartender in the World. Is that right?
Yeah, many years ago now. Over 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, you look young, but that's okay. But, today I was hoping, look, I know we're going to talk a lot about like opening new businesses and how that's going. And we can kind of steer this however you want. I mean, given, we both build businesses, we could just spend the whole time talking about that if you want. I developed an allergy to live yeast like 15 years ago, so I can't drink beer or wine. So I really I like cocktails. I don't drink very often, but I really like them. So I was going to just selfishly pick your brain a bit about the art of making cocktails. So we might dig into that a little bit if you're down with that as well.
Whatever you want. I'm an open book.
Cool. To kick it off, what's keeping you up at night right now, and like what's most top of mind for you?
Oh, what's top of mind right now? So obviously we've just opened our first expansion of the Dead Rabbit outside of New York City, and we are in the precipice of doing quite a few other venues related to Dead Rabbit and adjacent concept launches and stuff like that. So I'd say the biggest thing on my mind right now is how we're structuring the company and how we're capitalizing our expansion. So that would be the things that are keeping me up right now, because I always knew when we were going to start this expansion journey that we were going to learn a lot. We were going to make a lot of mistakes, but my whole philosophy rests on I don't like making the same mistake twice. So we're going to make mistakes. That's fine, as long as we learn from them and make better and new mistakes as we get further down the road here. So that'd be some of the things that are keeping me up, because I don't want the company to scale our key success factors, if you will, to get diluted, and for the concepts and experiences that we execute to just become commodified, like you see with a lot of other companies that expand. So that keeps me up at night. And then also making sure that we have enough cash in the company to support our growth. So there are two big pieces that are keeping me up.
I feel you, man. Are you raising capital right now?
We are, yeah. So we're doing an internal raise, and then we're getting closer now to looking at an external raising at the top co level to support the growth of the company. So it's exciting and nerve-wracking, I'd say, in equal proportions.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting that threshold now where, you're enough sort of expansion where it probably makes sense. Are you thinking about like private equity, or are you thinking just sort of like institutional or more restaurant type investors?
I think more high net worth institutional as opposed to private equity. I think that private equity piece will come at some point, but we're not there yet, because I think if once we dip our toe in that it becomes a very different enterprise at that point, and we want to protect, because I still very much view everything that we're doing as day one. So I want to make sure we're super protective over the integrity and the intention of everything that we're doing, and prove everything out until we get to that level. Because once we get to that level, as I said, things will become different, which is, listen, that's the way of life. But I'm reluctant to go there until we've done everything that we're trying to do at this stage.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's so hard to maintain that as you scale, but that's the thing that always falls off for most folks is, when you scale, you start to commoditize, make things more cookie cutter, because that's the easier way to do it. The harder way is how do you sort of maintain, your vision and your principles and also the feeling. And
Yep.
like when you scale, I mean, if you walk in Dead Rabbit in New York, there's a feeling you get.
Yeah.
And I know you've talked a lot about, a lot of the brand is about telling the stories of Irish artisans and musicians, and that sort of like downstream into the team that you have, and you clearly have a very sort of high standard, being the bartender that you are. For everybody that is listening that doesn't know, you're downplaying it obviously, but you were an insanely incredible mixologist, and that takes a lot of precision and a commitment to excellence and high standards and discipline. And you see that in Dead Rabbit. How the hell do you maintain that? Because that's you, and then you have to sort of impart that into all these people as you scale Dead Rabbit to Austin, to DC, and it's a lot of it is you, and a lot you. I think I've heard you say, like, my finger is on everything, but I'm not there, right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing. But like, again, like, how are you thinking about maintaining that, and what are you doing to sort of make sure that carries over to the next spot?
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's a handful, I'd say, of key barriers that we need to overcome to make this a success in terms of scaling in the right way. So leadership is critical. That's one barrier. So you can have the most beautiful looking store or most beautiful looking bar and great story, but it can all fall the wayside if you don't have the right leadership in place to set the tone for the culture and create a great culture. So leadership is definitely one. The company infrastructure. So, but I mean that across both the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure is critical. So making sure that we have scalable systems in place while also creating essentially a robust framework, while also simultaneously having a lot of freedom within that framework. But the framework has to be strong. Like there has to be guardrails. So that's another thing, making sure everybody's set up for success, both on the team member side, on the customer side, on our other stakeholders and shareholders. The culture, which I just spoke to, would be another huge one, but that would be loosely related to leadership, and then as an extension of culture, operations. So the operations are critical. That's where the rubber really hits the road. So making sure that the team are fully supported, set up for success. Everybody is focused on the macro and micro details. Because to me, a great experience, like you've obviously been in the Dead Rabbit, a great Dead Rabbit experience to me, and this goes back to something I remember Sasha Petratsky saying to me many, many years ago, that he was speaking specifically within the context of a Manhattan. And somebody asked him, well, what is a great Manhattan? And he said, well, a great Manhattan shouldn't taste like rye or bourbon. It shouldn't taste like vermouth. It shouldn't taste like bitters. It should taste like a perfectly balanced fusion of all those things. You shouldn't be able to point your finger on it necessarily. And that's, to me, is a great bar experience. It shouldn't be just the music or the art or the service, the drinks, the food, the cleanliness of the space, the soaps in the bathroom, no chewing gum underneath the bar or whatever. Everything looks prim and proper. It's all of those things coming together as one holistic, cohesive experience. So that's the operations, that's your hospitality, that's your service, that's the way you take care of the store and take care of the people that come into your store. And then the last part of that, to me, that we need to overcome is the marketing side of things. So and we've been very conscious of this in the past year or so. We certainly do not want to be recognized as this New York centric company, or a company that has this New York sort of ego or swagger or pretension. So we are first and foremost a company that celebrates contemporary Ireland. Obviously the gang, the Dead Rabbit, is a New York Irish gang, but it was when you zoom out, it was essentially set up to protect and advance Irish immigrants against xenophobia that they experienced when they came to America in the 19th century. So the gang was principally created to protect and advance Irish immigrants, and by extension, the Irish story. So that's what we sort of co-opt that, and that's where we're going into each market. And this is singularly talking about the Dead Rabbit at the moment. We're going in and basically saying we're celebrating and championing the contemporary Irish story, because a lot of these places all over America, the interpretation, the representation of Ireland is pigeonholed as like shooting shots, Davy Irish bars, leprechauns, St. Patrick's Day, and it's very, very limited. And we're here to show that Ireland is an extremely dynamic, progressive, diverse country, and there's so much creativity coming out of it and excellence across all the mediums. So that marketing side is critical, and we're digging into that even deeper now in terms of we're in the process of rebranding the top company as it's something that's brand agnostic, because we're bringing on other brands that are all everything that we do is it goes back to representing Ireland, because that's what I view myself as, a brand ambassador for the country essentially. As I said, we're rebranding that top company, so it's all about Ireland, and everything like cascades up to that or cascades down. So marketing and making sure that we're reaching the customers in each city, making sure that the bars are, again, this is the paradox that of business, that the Dead Rabbit brand is strong, but also it's idiosyncratic and localized to each market that it operates in. That's important as well, because when we opened up Austin, we had some New Yorkers that moved to Austin thinking it was going to be an exact replica of what we did in New York. And that was never, I was very transparent that was never going to be the case. Like, you would walk in and know that it's a Dead Rabbit because the DNA is the same, but the layout, it's airier, it's brighter, it's like more contemporary. And the reason for that is because Texans like bigger spaces, they like more comfortable spaces, so each Dead Rabbit and each other thing that we do will be different. I have no interest in doing exactly the same thing over and over again. So yeah, that's the 4 or 5 things that I think are critical as we're going through this period, and all of that sort of wraps in a bow in terms of how we do this well, and making sure that it doesn't become commodified. And your initial point of like, how are we doing it? Like, the leadership part for me is the one that I spend the most time on, because I'm never, like, 9 times out of 10 when people come into the bar, they're coming in here in the evenings or late at night. I'm not here. My work's done during this time up until like early afternoon or early evening, touching base with the leaders, making sure all the standards are being hit, making sure that I'm setting the leaders up for success. I'm holding them accountable for our standards, and really is instilling my standards and expectations across every aspect of the business. But again, in tandem with that, and again, another paradox is we have a brilliant leadership team. They have a lot of autonomy, but I expect great performance, so that's a couple of the things. I could probably ramble on for another hour, but I'll stop, because I'm sure you'll have questions.
It's a lot. Yeah. This is really difficult to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Scale the way that you're scaling, because each entity is its own individual corpus of like the brand, but its own sort of unique interpretation. That's hard, man. Each time you got to do a lot of research. You have to really understand the market, which, by the way, I think also makes it a way more risk averse way to sort of scale into new markets. I remember rolling out the same restaurant in Chicago that we had in New York, and it just totally flopped. And it just showed, like, you have to do a lot of research, and you have to understand not just your brand, but how your brand resonates with the community that you're in.
Yeah.
From what I understand, you also share a love of reading books. I'm sure you've read, Start with Why or things like that. You have this premise in your business that is, so deeply rooted in Ireland that it's very easy to connect to that, or not.
Yes.
And you don't have to. And then if you don't connect with it, fine, you don't need to work here. But like, opening another bar is just opening another bar. Finding another bar to have a drink at is you just walk down the street. But if you do it right, and it sounds like you are putting so much energy into creating this environment of representing Ireland. And I want to ask you about your hiring practices, that it makes it easier, even though it's so hard, I would assume, because people have something to fall back on. Like, this is really hard, but we're doing it because we love Ireland. We're doing it because we want to represent. We want to make sure people understand that there's way more to Ireland than just fucking leprechauns and
exactly
and Guinness.
Exactly.
So let's talk about like your hiring practice. I'm super curious how you think about, well, just generally speaking, do you have a methodology? Do you use like the A method of hiring, or do you like other things that you do that are specific to your world of how you think about like hiring leadership? We'll stick to just leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, and listen, we continue to make these mistakes, but we're making less of them, albeit it probably doesn't feel that way right in this very moment. But so, zooming out, when we first opened up Dead Rabbit, your point, I was this bartender. I was like a prodigious type bartender. Like, I was very talented very early, really hyper focused on bartending. All I cared about was bartending cocktails and being the best bartender in the world. that was literally it, and there's definitely a huge amount of narcissism and ego tied up in that I had to unpack when the awards came and the shit started hitting the fan. But when we opened, I would have hired based on like the name, the bartender name. So when we opened, we had like the Harlem Globetrotters, if you will, of bartending talent in our bar. That obviously didn't go well. It's a lot of ego, a lot of like set ways of doing things. And also I just was not an effective leader. So when I got sober like nine or so years ago, and as part of that process, I really closed the chapter on bartending and then moved into operating and entrepreneurship and all of that type of stuff. And that's where I really realized that I needed to apply the same level of discipline, education, reading, development into being a leader and an operator as I did as being a bartender. And that's when I really looked at our hiring practices, because we were hiring extremely poorly. Like there's been a couple of people with us now that've been with us for the past decade or so, but we would have just been going through people quickly. The culture wasn't great. They're just making a lot of mistakes. Went into college, like university, and started reading prolifically. So the books that I read around that time would have been top grading and a bunch of other books related to culture, related to recruitment, related to setting up a framework and a system. Because I love that quote. I don't think it's damning, but every system is perfectly set up for the results that it gets. So if you have problems with your recruitment, which we did, that's the way you've set it up. When I looked into that, and this took a couple of years, and this will get to our recruitment now, I started this and started understanding, like, because I would have sat down and we would have had a meeting. And my whole philosophy back then was, would I go for a beer with you, or would I want to, like, it was all gut based. And one of the books calls it voodoo magic. And that's what it is, because it's all intuitive or intuition. And using that metric of would I go for a beer with you is just a terrible metric or a terrible thing for building a team. It's just not the right way of going about things, because every team should have different personalities, should have different skill sets and all of that stuff. So the thing that I started off with first was obviously like, here are the rules for the company. So you're saying about leadership, so we'll just focus on, but we did this with every single role. But in terms of leadership and leaders in our company, what are the core competencies that I expect for that role? And then even going back to that, I started codifying. To get to that point, I would have codified our mission, our values, all of those things, because that all feeds in. Like everything should be integrated. So on leadership, like here's the competencies, here's what I expect. Then I would have went to the next step of what does that look like for our company. So like leadership. So take competent. One competency would be like strategic or execution or something like that. What exactly am I expecting for that? And then I would have built off questions that fit that competency. And then I would have built off of the questions to basically decide a rubric and like great, like here's what a great answer looks like. Here's what an okay answer looks like. Here's what a not okay answer looks like. And we did that for each role. So leaders have 20 competencies, I believe, and our front of house team has 8 to 10. And then as part of the leadership, and we did that again, we did this for everything. Once we had that, then we boxed it out into pre-interview questionnaire, where we're recruiting or where are we putting the advertisements out, how are we filtering, then the first interview, which is not in person, then the in-person interview, and then the last interview, and then the trail period. And then as part of that, there's due diligence and reference checks. So we basically, long story short, as I'm sure you'll get from this, we systematized it. We built a very intentional and set framework for how we recruit and how we bring people in. Like even so, you get the leader, but then we have to onboard the leader. We have to onboard all the team members. So what does that look? How do we do our performance management? Yada yada yada. So we're very very focused on that, and we continue to work on it.
Yeah.
So for in interviews, and like I went through this with leaders when we started the Austin period. There were some questions where like, we think we can do a better question, or we can have a better, so you're constantly developing it. But essentially you're taking all of that stuff that's in your head and you're putting it out on a piece of paper, and then basically making sure it all makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love that. Have you ever read Who, the A Method for Hiring from Jeff Smart?
Yeah. So the his father wrote Top Grading.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his son's called Jeff. I'm not sure what the dad's called, but I read Who, and I read top graded. And our like the Who method is basically what we use.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a calibrated, like it's our version of that system.
Yeah, you have to sort of adopt it to yourself. We do the same thing. Something else, honestly, that I've very recently started to do is and I've been saying this often. I actually don't even know how technically legal it is, but I hate job descriptions that are specific about, here's the things that you will do in your job.
Yeah.
These are all the tasks. I love the premise of here's the result we expect or the outcome.
Yeah.
Here's our operating principles, and here's how we'll communicate together.
Yeah.
And do your thing, so like as
Yeah.
long as you work within our first principles of what we believe, how we want to act and behave, and you hit these results, I'm good.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's a very certain type of person because they need to be okay with autonomy and lack of full direction. I find otherwise it just creates very task oriented people.
Yeah.
And then they fall back to like, but you didn't have this in my job description. It was only this. It doesn't say that I should be calling people and asking them this thing. That's why I also love the A method. And for anyone
Yeah.
that's listening, I would definitely recommend it because it's very outcome based. It's like, what's the outcome
Yeah.
you're looking for, and then how are you going to measure that? That they'll be able to do that, which is so much better than how we typically have hired in the past.
Oh, definitely. It was a nightmare. Like going back 10, 11 years ago, it was a nightmare.
Yeah. I am curious also. So we were talking about these systems and also just, I relate a lot to sort of your sort of bartender now, entrepreneur, or just focusing more on sort of leadership. I come from the fine dining world and that's what I did most of my life. And so much of it translates to running a business if you think about it the right way. But one thing I struggle with, and I'm curious how you deal with it, is I'm also super systems driven. And for a very long time, before this company, I had two companies ago, I owned like these hot dog restaurants and I systematized fucking everything, literally everything. And then I realized I got to a point where like, oh, basically what I've created is an environment where I'm almost de-incentivizing you to think independently because everything is like a system. And my sort of learning lesson was like, hey, like it's actually a lot better if you can just teach people the right way to think about the outcome you're looking for, as opposed to just you need systems as well. But it's hard, man. It's hard to balance, and you must be dealing with that a lot, especially with Dead Rabbit. And I know you have other concepts that you're rolling out as well. But like, how do you think about the balance between systems and just people and your sort of vision?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I went through the same, not the same exact context, but essentially over regulating or over prescribing how you want things done. And I've definitely hugely pulled back from that. I remember reading a book from Ray Dalio, and it was all about his principles.
Yeah,
And
great book.
I think that, like you called them first principles a couple minutes ago, that's really what it's about. We have a lot of different, like obviously we have our values and we have the pillars of what constitutes a great Dead Rabbit experience and what our customers expect from us. But we also read together as a leadership team like a new book a month.
Oh, that's cool.
So that we develop our shared vocabulary of speaking. So we read a book called Broken Windows, Broken Business, which is like loosely based on the Broken Windows theory of criminality. And I'm aware that there's some controversy in terms of how that was used in the criminal or in the policing world, that led to stop and frisk and like a whole bunch of problematic situations in that context. But a broken window in a business context is like when you go into McDonald's and there's shit laying on the ground, or the windows aren't cleaned, or there's chewing gum under the bar, stuff isn't perfect. So we use that to talk about, like, if there's glasses sitting on the bar for longer than 60 seconds, that's a broken window. But basically what I'm trying to get at is we talk about broad philosophical and principle driven operating mechanisms, or like even life mechanisms, to be honest with you, and we use that to talk about what is important to the business. So that's real. I really try to make sure that we've got the right, like, that stuff right, the cultural stuff right, how we're communicating, how we're speaking about things, making sure that we're very clear on what's important and not important to the business. And I've got away from really overdoing things, because I want to get people who are intrinsically motivated, that want autonomy, that are comfortable with ambiguity, but also know what the company stands for, what our expectations are, who we want to be and where we want to be, and kind of all that side of things. So it's really training people's minds as opposed to training them to like the specific behaviors of building around or serving a customer, because that stuff, that's to me, that's the easy stuff. It's this part that's the hard part.
Yeah. This is probably a rabbit hole, so feel free to stay 50,000 feet. But um, the onboarding process for a leader, given all of these principles you have and how detail oriented you guys are with, running this business, what is the onboarding like for a new leader?
We actually built this all out during COVID because that's when we started restructuring the company, and like I separated from a long-term collaborator, and we have an onboarding software solution called Rise. It's basically a content creator, but you can create training plans and all that kind of stuff. And so I built that out across 4 different aspects. So leadership, operations, execution, and I can't remember the other one, but there's 4 different modules, and there's substantial modules. And it basically starts from principles and then it goes into actual practices. So we outline all of that across all the leadership facets. And it gets very granular in terms of like, here's how to use our Slack, or here's how to do this, or here's how to onboard a new team member has to fill out this paper, all that type. It gets very granular, but it starts very philosophical at the top, and there's reading recommendations and all of that type of stuff. So again, everything's externalized. We say what's important to the business, why the business exists, how we operate, what we stand for, what excellence looks like to us. Like there's no ambiguity in terms of the expectations, and we really sought to create that as if they're unsure of anything, they can go back to it and have a look at it. But I'm also starting with the principles. And like, if you know the principles, maybe 7 times out of 10, you're going to make the right decision. And the 3 times you make a wrong decision, that presents a moment for us to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So that's what we did.
How long are they onboarding before they're actually doing? Like do you stop them from actually getting involved in the business until they're completely done with onboarding?
So we have their like where everything should be done in terms of going through that portal in 2 weeks. So they'll have 2 weeks of onboarding with somebody with them every day of those 2 weeks, and then after that, they start.
Yeah.
Because I have absolutely no fear of people making mistakes. I fully expect if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing enough. You're not trying things. You're not pushing yourself out there. So we start the hand holding or the stabilizers, if you will, after 2 weeks, fully under the expectation that there's going to be mistakes made. But that said, we have such a strong team. Like obviously Austin, we're shaping that team, but in New York, that team is very highly, it polices itself. And if the leader is doing something that's not, if it's unusual or they're making a mistake, the team will very quickly let you know or let us know. So again, we can help bring the leader in the right space. But in terms of when we expect a leader to fully feel comfortable operating a store or ace in the role, you're talking 6 months, really, until we have full confidence. Because at the end of the day, all of these relationships are high trust, and the trust is the cement of all of this type of stuff. So it takes that time to develop that trust, and the trust, we look at it as 6 months, and we fully understand after the 2 week like hard onboarding that there's going to be from the 2 week to the 6 month period. There's going to be a lot of other developmental moments.
Yeah. I've made mistakes in the past where I hired someone really good. Like I knew they were really good.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of let them do their thing, and it was a big mistake on my part because,
Yeah.
just because they're really good doesn't mean that they are going to be able to do things through the lens of what you want,
Yeah.
How you want them to think or your principles. So now I'm like really slow with onboarding. I sort of do like the I do, we do, you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes like really good leaders will be like, come on, man, like let's get this thing going. I want to jump in, and I have to like slow it down because
Yeah.
we have these expectations like, hey man, you've done this, or woman, you've done this 100 times. I know you're really good at this. So just go and do. But we have these expectations, and you Jack, I'm sure you have very specific expectations of
Yeah.
how this person should operate. Have you had times when you hired someone really good and then they didn't really execute the way you wanted and you had to sort of like ratchet back?
Very recently in Austin, we had the situation where we had to separate, so we went through an extensive period of onboarding, and it just, because you always try and assume the best and hope for the best, but there becomes a point that, as you know yourself, like you'll have went through all your steps, you'll have tried to make it work, and it's just not working. And again, all of this, like everything in life, all of this is paradoxes. All of this is like how far do you, or how quickly do you let somebody go? How slow do you go? How quickly do you hire somebody? How slow do you hire somebody? At the end of the day, you can have the best system a candidate will get through that you're very comfortable with and very confident in. But ultimately, until you get in the metaphorical bed together, you don't know how it's all going to work. So we went through that in Austin. We went our separate ways, and we are quickly course correcting. Like, I'm a bit sad about that, obviously, because we as you can tell, we spent so much time and detailing and documenting and putting everything out there and going through this recruitment process. But at the end of the day, you cannot be hamstrung by any of that. You have to make decisions. You have to make them as quickly as you can, and you always have to prioritize the business. And I'm very, very transparent communicator. I'm very clear and very candid, direct. You'll never think, what is Jack thinking about? Because I'm just going to say exactly what I'm thinking about. And I'll keep it respectful, but I don't mince my words. So that's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And I also have I have high expectations for myself. I have high expectations for everybody that has a relationship with our business. So that's customers, shareholders, stakeholders, customers, team members, especially leaders. So we went through a whole thing of, like, in this situation in Austin, this person have, wanted like a 40-hour, 50-hour a week type situation. And we're all about balance, but I believe every leader should be in a space or should be working for 55 to 60 hours, so there's things like that I just
Yeah.
expect. And that's still, even within that still affords a lot of room for personal things being on top of it. Being a leader, the primary leader of a store, you have to be connected all the time. If a message comes through that the boiler's broke or the sewage pipe or something, like that, has to be responded to. You can't just switch off. Yeah, so we just went through that.
Yeah. Sucks.
And yeah, it does suck. And the other part of it is, I am very aware that we're not for everybody, and I'm very transparent when we're working our way through that. I'm like, we are very performance driven. Like, when you're here, you're fully here. Like, we expect people to be connected. We expect people to, when they come in, that they're fully in. There's a heavy drinking culture and drug culture in our industry, unfortunately. And like, we have zero tolerance for that bullshit. If you come in and you're hungover or you're not ready to execute and you're a leader, like, that's a terrible tone to set for the entire store. So there's just a lot of expectations that we have that are off-putting. And listen, that's fine. I'm completely comfortable with that, but we're not gonna settle.
Yeah. It always sucks to have to fire somebody or let them go. What did you learn, or how did you change or update your process of hiring now that that happened?
Yeah. So with the situation in Austin, and that's, we always do that. So there's always a post-mortem of any situation, in terms of, I'm a firm believer, you always have to assume responsibility for it. So if it failed, why did it fail? What was our part in this failure? So I'd say our part in this failure was, we quickly realized that this wasn't going to work, but we basically tried to make it work. And in terms of leadership, so like, one thing that's important for me, I have no time for people who are late. If you say you're going to meet somebody at a time, you be there on that time. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got their lives. You have to respect one another. Like, to me, it's respect.
Yeah.
Within the context of this specific situation, there was punctuality issues, which to me are just code red issues. I'm a firm believer in the way you do one thing is in the way you do pretty much everything. So to zoom out, we should have made the decision very quickly, as opposed to dragging it out for as long as we did. And then secondly, we could have done more. So going into a new market, we didn't contact people that are well established in the market to get feedback on leaders, and it became apparent to us after the fact that we should have done that. And that's another thing that we're going to be adding to that framework,
Yeah.
And then the third thing is the onboarding process was too elongated. So we brought the leaders in when we perceived we were a month or two away. We're going to bring leaders in once we know we're 4 to 6 weeks out, because we're on the ground the whole time. So the onboarding process is when we're on the ground as opposed to before the bar opens.
Yeah.
So that was another mistake that we made, because I think that by the time that the bar opened, there was a lot of like fatigue and all of that type of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of things that we've looked at, and we're going to improve for DC or forever we open up next. And we're going to continue to make mistakes, but it's just making it better. It's making it better for us. It's making it better for the team member in question. So it's just setting everybody up for success better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with running and growing a business. It's just full of mistakes. And
Yeah.
as long as you keep, learning and updating your knowledge base, it's all that matters. I have this, it's kind of a dumb acronym because it's not in order, but for anybody on my team where something goes wrong, I call it staying thin. And basically what it means is if something went wrong with someone, it's either training, hiring, inspiring, or nurturing, right? Either the worst one is that you hired the wrong person. That's what sucks the most. That's one that stings the most and hurts the most because, you fucked up, and they might actually be really good and just not good for what you needed them for.
Yeah.
And that sucks the worst. But then if you did hire the right person, when things go wrong, how well did you train them? And also how well did you like inspire them and let them know like why you guys exist and why they should want to be here. And then everybody operates differently. So like how did you nurture them? Some people want to be more pushed, some people want to be more empathized with. For me, I find it to be really like a load off my shoulder in that like I know it's all my fault no matter what.
Yeah.
Whenever anything goes wrong, even if it's a very blatant mistake and they like really, like I let that happen. And what was the environment? There's a Stoic quote that I really love, basically paraphrasing, but it's like, how are you complicit, in the environment that you say you don't want? It stings the most with hiring, man, and firing, because it is almost always our fault in some way,
100%. I think once you accept that, it's very liberating, and not liberating in the sense that you want to stop making those mistakes or mitigate those mistakes as much as possible. But when a lot of times people have ego wrapped into, oh, I'm a great recruiter or I'm a great this, and like that's just all bollocks, like we're all works in progress. We're all different. Obviously there's some people who are better than others, but if you're approaching this thing like you know everything and you're all conquering, and it's just not going to work. It's going to breed hubris, and you're most likely not serving your team in the best way.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to pivot for a minute just because selfishly I want to ask you about some cocktails, and then maybe we'll after that I want to talk just more about like all the brands you're working on and a couple of things. But I love making cocktails at home because I can't drink beer or wine anymore. I don't drink that often, but I do like to really make them. So my first question would just be like strictly from a tactical standpoint, what makes like a great cocktail and a great bartender?
So I'd say for a great cocktail, it's a couple of aspects to that. It's obviously the ingredients that you use. So you've got to have great quality ingredients. So that it covers your ice, it covers your citrus, your syrups, your modifiers, like spirits. Obviously, the equipment is important. You've got to have decent equipment, cocktail shaker, strainer, and all of that type of stuff. So you've got to have the right pieces to make a great drink. So that's important. And then following the right recipe. So for me, and obviously you'll be getting listeners on here at various different stages of this, but I would always recommend people to start with one drink. What is your favorite drink? So some martini, get a couple of vermouths, get a couple of gins, get a couple of vodkas, start small, get a good stirring or a good stirring device or a good shaker if you prefer it shaken or stirred, and build from that. Like nail that drink. So nail your stir, nail your shake, get good quality ingredients related to that one drink, and then start exploring outside of that. But making sure you've got the right ingredients, the right equipment, and a good recipe to start off, and you're respecting the processes of the drink. So stirring, like and we're spoiled for information on this, but Googling or YouTubing how to stir a drink, like really paying attention, because a lot of people make an absolute mess of the actual production part of the drink, so you can have Tanqueray and you can have Nolly Poit, you can have the best ingredients, but when it comes to the execution part, people make a dog's dinner of it. And that's what anytime I go to a bar, I order the most simple classics, the likes of a martini, the likes of a daiquiri, the likes of a Cosmo. And if they don't get that right, I know where the program's at, because that's like I think it was Steve Jobs said that simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. Like if you can't master your basics, you're not going to master anything else beyond that foundational level. So really focus hard in on every single aspect that's related to that one drink. So the martini, great quality ice. You've chilled your glass. You're using fresh vermouth.
What does that mean by great quality ice?
Yeah, so again, a lot of cocktail novice, like if a lot of people who are making drinks at home, they will use shitty bag ice. So like the stuff that you get from like the liquor store, and that like it's cracked. It doesn't have great surface area. And then when you bring it home, the larger problem is that you put it in a freezer, and it takes on the characteristics that are in that freezer. So people put like fat in the freezer, they put peas in the freezer, they put fish in the freezer. So ice is like just a sponge. It just absorbs all of those odors. So if you're putting it beside a bag of peas and you make a martini, you're going to have a pea martini, or a carrot martini or whatever, and listen, that can be nice, but that's not the intention. So you should just take that out. So you have to have good quality ice.
You said surface area too.
Yes.
Meaning like ridges and
yeah. So when you say this is your glass, so it's obviously a stirring glass should be see-through, but when they're a surface, so you want to basically make the surface area as small as possible, so you're controlling the amount of water that is omitted during the stirring process. So the ice should always be to the top of the glass, or it should be at the very least above the level of the liquid. So it's another problem I see with a lot of at-home cocktail makers, both stirring and shaking. They do not put enough ice into this part or into the shake. So they put ice below the surface area, they mix it around, and it's just pumping out water, and it's not getting the drink cold enough. Because a great stirred drink should be it should be bitingly cold, but it should have the right amount of water to retain. So it should be cold and it should be silky, and the water should be enough water in there to bind the ingredients. But most times when somebody makes these drinks at home, they add not enough ice. So it basically what happens, because the surface area is much larger, it's throwing out ice super quick because there's more surface area for the liquid and the ice to meet. So you're getting a lot of water. So you've lost that silkiness of a stirred drink, but it hasn't got the right temperature. So they fill it all up, or they understir it, or they overstir, so it's like, even just in that one thing, it's very, very intricate.
Is the size of the ice important too, given you don't want it to melt?
It is, yeah, it is. It is, yeah, but if it's, yes, so you want to use big chunks of ice, or big solid cubes, but without being contradictory, as long as you're like packing the whole tin or the whole device with ice, as long as it's not like crouched ice, because then it's obviously just going to come out super quick. Like even liquor store ice, if it's dry ice, so what I mean by dry, it hasn't sat outside of the freezer and it's wet, because then that's just throwing out water right away. But even if you buy liquor store ice, because it is good quality ice, but you just have to, it has to be cold, it has to be dry ice, and it has to be stored right. So as long as you're not storing it, if it's in a clean freezer, you should be in good shape. Like that should make you a good drink. But that ice will perform differently too. Like in the bar here, we use Hoshizaki ice, so they're perfect cubes. And then in the parlor, we use cracked ice. So all three of those respond differently. So I always remember watching a documentary about Ayrton Senna, and he talked about this is Formula One, and all the drivers were talking about a course, and they talked about the course very mechanically, but Ayrton Senna talked about the course like the way it felt and the way it moved. That's the way I look at these types of things with these drinks. Like you have to have a relationship with the drink, in the sense of you're listening to the drink. So when you're stirring a drink, you should be tasting it multiple times throughout its process to go, right, that's understirred, that's getting close to being done, and then you strain it. So it's not like a lot of people say stir it 10 times left ways and like that's all crap.
Hmm.
Every drink, every piece of ice, the temperature in the room, everything is different. Everything
Yeah.
is always different and changing. So you have to be fluid to that. Even like lemons, if you're making a whiskey sour, the acidity of the lemon one day is going to be different to the acidity of the lemon the next day. So you have to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize that there is an expectation that there should be some dissipation of like the water going into the drink.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting. So, another thing I'm always curious about. So, at my house, right, I got a bunch of bourbons, I got a bunch of like, vermouths, and then I have, whatever, some Luxardo and some Aperol, Campari, whatever. And, I often end up going to like go-tos of, a Manhattan or a paper airplane, or, maybe I'll just use rye with Aperol and vermouth or something. But are there like, in cooking, we have mother sauces, right? Like, so you'll have like a hollandaise and you can make 12 different things or 100 different things from a hollandaise. Are there like mother bases of a cocktail, where it's like, whatever, there's something bitter or something sweet, something that you use that you can then sort of iterate to make new versions of cocktails? Or is it always kind of a ton of R&D to get new versions of cocktails?
I mean, there's definitely cocktail families, and people have. Gary Reagan has a great book on it. I can't remember the name of it, but he has a great book that's, I don't know if I have it here, but it's basically he laid out all the different cocktail families. But even going broader than that, when we opened up the Dead Rabbit, the second floor, because cocktails now are just used as a all-encompassing name. But back in the 19th century, cocktail was just one very small family of the kingdom of mixed drinks. So a cocktail was properly first defined in 1806 as water, sugar, spirits, and bitters. That's what an old fashioned is a cocktail. So you would have had that. You would have had punches. You would have had sours, fizzes, fixes, daisies, flips, possets, eggnogs. There's all these different types of families, but they all sort of derive from each other. So like you punch started as like it's a punch bowl, but then from the punch you got sours, you got fixes, you got fizzes, and then from sours, you got daiquiris, Cosmos, whiskey sours, gimlets. From daisies, you would have got the margarita, the sidecar, the brandy crusted. So everything. If you do your work as a bartender, you realize you figure this all out, and you see how everything is interconnected. Because again, I would advocate to all of our team here that you've got to understand what happened yesterday before you start creating what happens tomorrow. And by that, I mean, understand those families and mixed drinks, understand your history, understand your technical aspects, understand the spirits, the liqueurs, fully understand everything. So then you can start to be derivative,
Yeah.
so to your point, there is definitely families that you can go off and what you were speaking about there, like everything in your house, you're making essentially, again, when you zoom out, you're making paper planes and Manhattan. So you're making essentially cocktails and
Uh-huh.
sours. So you start from the cocktails and sours, and then you work your way down, and then you'll hit a Manhattan, and then underneath the Manhattan, you've even got your Rob Roy's, you've got the Red Hook, you've the Brooklyn cocktail. There's so many
Hmm.
things from that. And then the paper plane, you go up, then you're hitting daiquiri, Cosmo, last word. So it's all they're all connected
Yeah.
in some shape, way, or form.
So here's the thing, like I'm always curious about too is at what point did these things that are like ubiquitous cocktails just stop becoming something that other people then use? Like somebody invented the paper airplane. I think it was the Nonino family, maybe, but like,
I think
you
the
would.
paper plane was Joaquin from Death and Company.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, yeah, I
I
think
have
so.
no
I
idea.
think so. But it's a contemporary. I would call that a contemporary classic.
I'm going to Google that right now. Cause like one thing I'm always curious about is like, are there, we drink a Manhattan today, right? That's from, I don't know what the history of is, but from a long time
Yeah.
ago. Like, how often are new drinks now ubiquitously used in other places?
You'd be surprised. The reason why those drinks have stood the test of time is because of their simplicity. So Manhattan is on paper a very simple drink. A martini is a very simple drink on paper, same as all of those classics. The problem with today's bartenders and it's not the problem, it's a great thing because you have to constantly iterate and bring relevance and something different to your consumer. So in that, there's a lot of focus on homemade ingredients and infusions and science and stuff like that. Bring it like to do something different. But one bar that has excelled in these contemporary classics is Attaboy or Milk and Honey.
Uh-huh.
So and Death and Company to a lesser degree. Like you would have had the Death and Company with family, I believe, if it's not the paper plane, but Joaquin definitely created a bunch of those types of drinks.
You were right,
Del
by the way.
Ward
I googled it. It
yeah,
was Sam Ross
yeah,
and Sasha Petrosky. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the Attaboy Milk and Honey family. So they created. So for example, they out of that bar, those four walls, you have the Penicillin, you have Rome with a View, Red Hook. There's a whole bunch of classics that are just from the contemporary classics. But the reason that they're contemporary is because they're replicatable. Like you can make them at home. Whereas a lot of these bars, and even our bar here on the second floor, the ingredients that they have here would take you an age to make them.
Yeah.
So simplicity is definitely key, and it's harder as we go through to as we evolve. It's harder to create those drinks because the pool of ingredients. There is new ingredients coming on, so you can do things, but like the big pieces are done. Like a
Yeah.
daiquiri is a daiquiri. So what can you do with a daiquiri to make it different? Like you can infuse it with sugar, or you can infuse it with fruit, or you can do. But the trifecta of that drink has been created. But you can definitely create contemporary classics. And to your point, like the penicillin for one drink, it's in menus all over the world. Like I created a drink called the Irish Maid that's derivative of the Maid drink that I believe also the Attaboy guys created. And it's very simple, and it has been in menus all over the world. So it's definitely doable, but simplicity is the key.
Yeah, it does seem like so much of it is derivative. It is difficult to create
Yeah.
sort of new drinks. I did this panel I think like 6 months ago, and this bartender named Ryan Chittiwardena was on the panel.
Oh, shit, Ranchetti, yeah.
Really, really awesome guy. And he was talking through his flavor profiles. And I was like, oh, that's really different. I've never heard of, I mean, a lot of the fermentations, and I think he actually like maybe fecal matter in one thing, like in some way. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Ryan's a bit. So me and Ryan came through in the same, like we were in the same like class. We came through the exact same year in Ireland, and he was in Scotland at the time, and I was obviously in England. But I would be very much traditionalist in my approach. Like I'm very much historically driven,
Mm-hmm.
where Ryan would be much more on the other side of that. But he's an absolute genius. Ryan's a genius. Like
Yeah. Okay. One last thing on cocktails, and then we'll move on. The shake. How
yes,
important is like how far you go back and the velocity of the shake? And they have that like weight that you can sometimes put in the shaker. Have you seen that like rubber square like
yeah.
square weight? Can you talk to me about the shake? Like how important is it? Like what's the like is the technique really need to be they sometimes it's pretty flashy how far they go back and things.
So the short answer is the shake is very important. The other part of that, again, there's paradoxes. The everything in life. A lot of people make things more complicated than they ought to be. The whole reason why you shake a drink is to get ice from one side of the tin to the other side of the tin to incorporate air and to incorporate water. So a lot of people add a lot of movements and techniques that are not, first and foremost, they're not going to serve your body, because if you're doing that for 20 years, you're definitely going to give yourself problems. And secondly, you're going to probably overshake it or undershake it. Like with this stuff that you're doing, you're creating more space to make mistakes. So in terms of shaking, I always, I think it's from Harry Craddock, you're waking the drink up as opposed to sending it to sleep. So you've got to shake it vigorously. You've got to shake it in a way that you're comfortable with. You've got to shake it in a way that you can do that 150, 200 times in a night for high volume. Like that's what you need to do if you're in these bars and these tiny speakeasy bars with 20 people in it. Like obviously you can be a bit more out there with your shake, but because you're going to be making maybe 50 drinks, shaking drinks a night, as opposed to in our bars it can be up to 300 in one shift. But the key thing with shaking a drink, as I said, is that you're moving it from the bottom of the tin to the top of the tin quickly. You're adding water and you're adding air. So, and then the other part of that is when you've finished the shake, you are straining it into the glass as quickly as possible. So that's actually a mistake that a lot of people make. They shake it, they put it on the bar top, they
Mhm.
go and grab a glass, or they're talking to somebody. By the time they strain that drink off, it's dead. I think it's in the same book, Harry Craddock from 1930 said you should be drinking a cocktail while it's laughing at you. And laughing at you when you make a perfect penicillin or a daiquiri or a Cosmo or whatever, it has that effervescence almost on the top of the drink. You have those really small ice crystals that add like a subtle crunchiness to the top of the drink. You lose that if it sits too long in the tin. So you want to strain it off as quickly as possible. So shaking it vigorously, shaking it because a lot of people don't shake vigorously. They're shaking it in their hand, holding it with one hand, or they're not getting it exactly from the bottom of the tin to the top of the tin. So it's just going in a small circle inside the tin and not actually reaching either end. So you want to be making sure you're doing that. And then once you've nailed that part, you want to be straining it into the glass as quickly as possible. So shaking is incredibly important. It's again the same as stirring. Like to me, a great bartender, because all of us can follow recipes. Great bartenders to me, it's all like in the wrists. So the way you do a dash, or the way you pour, the way you stir, and the way you shake is really like what separates good bartenders to great bartenders, and then elite bartenders, even above great bartenders, are people that fully understand exactly when a stir drink's ready, when they need to tailor citrus one day because it's slightly too acidic or it's not acidic enough, So a great and a world class bartender understands all of that, So there's levels to this as a way there is with any
Yeah.
profession.
It's so funny how similar it is to great cooking.
Yeah,
Because it's the same in a recipe for anything. Like,
yeah,
a list of ingredients is usually fucking irrelevant, right?
yeah,
It's how like, and that's the problem with most recipes is they're implicit instead of explicit.
yeah,
It's just, here's the ingredients, mix well,
yeah.
but there's so much more that goes into that to make it exactly the way, that you want. Okay. So what drinks do you, I know you can ask, the guests, like, do you want to shaken or stirred? But I know, like, usually, like, things that have fruit juices in them, you want to aerate, things like that. But, like, are there heuristics around things that you should definitely shake versus not?
Um, yeah. These continue to get blurred as we continue to innovate. But I'd say like the big broad strokes, generally recipes that are all spirits and modifiers, so are like liqueurs or sugar, you'll stir that. So anything essentially without citrus or fruit or stuff like that, you will stir. Once you incorporate fruit and citrus and eggs and stuff, you're going to shake, or has any dairy products, you're going to shake. But again, there's always exceptions to that rule. Like I remember the first time I had a stirred gimlet, it was revelatory to me. I think it was Sasha made it for me, and I thought this was incredible. Or the first time I had a shaken Sazerac, Simon Difford made me a shaken Sazerac, and I was like, Jesus, this is so tasty. Do you know why? But I understand to the traditionalists that's probably blasphemous. But there's a lot of novelty in changing those up as long as the final product. Because again, this is a problem with a lot of people in today's world. They do things because it's cool, not because it's good. But I'm like, it still has to be good. It doesn't matter if it's cool; it has to be good. So, but to your point, there is heuristics in terms of if it's mostly alcohol, you'll stir it. If it's got fruit juice, dairy, or stuff like that, you'll shake it. But there's even broader than that. Stirring is, as I said to you, I would mention this word all the time when I talk about stirring. It should be viscous. It should be silky. It should have like a real beautiful texture and mouthfeel to it. As should a shaken drink, but a shaken drink, it's much more fluffier. It's got those really fine crystals in there. So it just depends what you want to do with the drink.
All right. I promise I'm done asking about cocktails. What else is going on other than Dead Rabbit? You have obviously the Irish exit in Penn Station, or they don't call it Penn Station anymore, do they? They call it Moynihan.
Yeah, it's called Moynihan Train Hall, but it's Penn State. Like it's just a new Penn Station. Yeah, so we opened that. It was actually our anniversary 2 days ago, our first anniversary. So we
Wow.
opened that a year ago, and it's been doing fantastic. And that is much more of our like QSR Irish pub experience. So we built this experience around an opportunity came up to potentially bring Dead Rabbit to Moynihan Train Hall, and because of the amount of intellectual, like the intention and the sophistication with Dead Rabbit, it just doesn't work in that type of context. So then it became, how do we own transit experiences, and how does it fit this focus on contemporary Ireland and leveling up Irish experiences in those contexts? So, I mean, I'm sure you'll have seen this. Pretty much every restaurant or airport or train station has a shit Irish bar. So the Irish accent was built to show, and they're all dark wood. It's all very dark and masculine and shit, and just not great quality. So we wanted the Irish accent to be. Obviously, you know what the name the Irish accent means, but we sort of co-opted. It's a funny name, so it's a good name because people always have like a smile when they hear the name. But beyond that, we mean it as an exit to Ireland. Like this is your quick exit to Ireland while you're in these otherwise sterile experiences of train stations and airports. And the brand is much. It owns its travel nature, or its transient nature, but it's brighter. It's very contemporary, very fun, very dynamic, very relevant. So we launched that last year, and we're aiming to expand that into other train stations in airports across America, and hopefully we'll get some in Ireland. So that's the Irish exit. Next year, we're also going to be launching. So we're calling it McGarry Sports and Social. Essentially, what we did with the Dead Rabbit and the pub vertical in terms of doing the best quality Irish pub. And listen, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I'm and I've thick enough skin, but I view what we do with Dead Rabbit as it's the best Irish pub, and like in America. That's what the goal is. That's what we're trying to do, and our differentiation comes from our focus on authenticity, our focus on our collaborations and our partnerships, and all of that fun stuff. But we're now trying to take that to the sports bar vertical and the entertainment vertical. So a lot of these sports bars and entertainment venues are soulless. They're primarily for bros. They have no soul. The drinks and the food is not great. The hospitality is not great. So we're aiming to bring like what we do with hospitality, all of that fun stuff into a sports bar, an entertainment venue, and use that as our way of celebrating Irish and Irish American sporting culture. So we're launching our first one of those next year, and we're very excited. We'll be debuting the first one in New York, and then we're also developing other concepts that celebrate food, coffee, different stories that haven't been told about the Irish story yet. So we're always looking for new ways to champion contemporary Irish culture or to tell new Irish stories.
Very cool, man. I gotta ask, and we can bleep this out if you want. But what's your take on Puck Fair? I know it's closed now, but
In New York,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, New York Puck Fair. Listen, I love Puck Fair when it was open.
I did too, man.
We have some partners that were actually that created Puck Fair. To me, that's like an Americana Irish bar.
Yeah, it was the
But it was
go-to.
listen, it was a good bar. It was a good pub. Like I walked into it when I first arrived in New York, and I'm like, this is a good pub. I wouldn't say for authenticity or anything like that, but it was just a good,
Yeah,
fun, good atmosphere, good vibe. The shape of the room and all. It was just a very, very good pub. I was actually sad to hear because they obviously ripped that whole building down. I was very sad that New York lost that bar because that was it was a great spot.
it really was. I mean, I moved to New York in '99, 2000,
Yeah,
and that was one of the spots we were,
yeah, 100%.
downtown. I was bummed when it closed, but yeah, very different, obviously from Dead Rabbit. I gotta ask one more thing. I know we skipped on the we left the cocktails, but I forgot to ask this, and I just clear ice.
Yes.
How do you make clear ice? Because apparently this is a difficult thing, and it's really prestigious when you can't. What's the deal with clear ice?
So clear ice is basically ice without impurities. The minerals it's basically minerals when they freeze in water are cloudy. So it's not that hard to make it. If you have a Cambro, like a Cambro like that, or a pot or a pan, generally the last part of the ice to freeze. And that's the reason why you see ice, it's generally always cloudy in the middle, and on the sides it's clear. because after, so say you have something, and every freezer's different. So I don't want to, when you put whatever you're using to freeze it, put it in the freezer and keep an eye on it every 12 hours. It'll start to freeze that way in, and it'll all be crystal clear. And then you'll have the pocket in the middle. Once it's got to that point, you basically want to drain that water out, because when it freezes, it basically freezes and it goes cloudy, and then it essentially explodes so that the whole thing becomes cloudy. So you want to, obviously it's less efficient because you have to cut a big piece of the cloudy ice, or the water that constitutes the cloudy ice, out. But it's pretty easy to do, So if you just get a big enough receptacle, put good quality water in, so filtered as possible. Generally, after about 36 to mid 40s, like high 40 hours, that'll be crystal clear. And then that pocket of water in the middle will be there, and you just drain it out. You'll just use an ice pick, put the pick in to cut through the ice and drain it out, and everything around that should be crystal clear.
All right. So then this is cutting ice like by hand then.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is, listen, you should, if you're a cocktail connoisseur, you should be doing that. But they're also is, if you get really filtered water or distilled water and you put it in the molds, it'll be pretty clear. Most supermarkets sell distilled water or heavily filtered water now. So you should be in pretty good shape if you freeze that. Like, it should be pretty clear. It's only if you're using water that's not heavily filtered, where you run into problems.
What is the benefit to the cocktail when it's clear ice?
Well, the ice is definitely it's denser, because when it's cloudy, it's going to melt quicker, because it's a bit more, there's more porosity when it has that cloudy stuff. Like it slushes quicker, whereas the crystal clear it's just stronger. It's got more integrity. Like, essentially what you want when you're having an old fashioned, or if you have a Manhattan and you're drinking it over a block of ice, your first sip should essentially be exactly the same as the last sip. That's what we're aiming for. So you'll get that with a beautiful crystal clear chunk of ice. To be honest, you'll even get that if it's a big chunk and it's in your glass. If it's a bit cloudy, you'll still get that. But if it's heavily cloudy, it'll melt quicker for sure, because it's just not as it doesn't have the same density or the same strength.
Okay. I'm not going to ask this here because it'll probably take too long, but where can I, and anybody who actually wants to know, where can we learn how to shave our own ice? To cut our own ice cubes?
Cut your own ice cubes. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
You can just YouTube it.
You could YouTube it. There's definitely people that have like, particularly the folks in Japan are heavily into that stuff. But you'll get video. I mean, YouTube has videos on everything, so I'm confident you'll find people that'll show that. So it's but again, it's not that difficult. And there's knives and equipment now that you can get now to make ice diamonds and ice balls and stuff. It's not that difficult. You just need to learn how to hold the ice pick in a way that you're not going to injure yourself, and the same with the knives. And then make sure you've got the gloves, so that if you do make a mistake, you're not going to A&E.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my daughter will want to cut ice too if she sees me. What's the next 5-10 years for you? Obviously, you're opening up more Dead Rabbits. It sounds like maybe a lot more of these Irish exits. What else you got in the pipe?
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing is to grow, to basically challenge as many misconceptions around Irish culture as possible. So it's not growth for the sake of growth. Obviously, you want to grow, and there's an economic side to that, but that's not what motivates me. The thing that motivates me is the fact that Americans still have heavily outdated understandings of what constitutes Irish culture. And I'm really keen to show Ireland as it is today and as it's developing. Ireland today is so different to when it was even when I was a kid. The amount of diversity, the immigrant populations coming in and really fusing their cultures with our culture. Like, it's just incredible, the stuff that's going on back home. And you have also the ending of political violence in the north of Ireland, and then the ending of the sort of Catholic Church's stronghold on people in the south of Ireland. So people are really expressing themselves now. They're creating art, they're creating music, they're really just transcending. And I'm just so incredibly proud to be from Ireland. And I'm incredibly proud to tell that story. And I'm also incredibly proud to take it in different directions and challenge things, take the Irish pub and take it to as far in completely different places as possible, or Irish restaurants, or the understanding of Irish food, or whatever. So in 5 to 10 years, I'm hoping to do a lot more fun things with the Dead Rabbit, with McGarry's, with Irish Exit, with a handful of the other concepts that we're developing that are very, very unique. They're fusing different culture. Like, the thing with Irish people is we have got everywhere. So there's Irish stories to be told all over the world, and I'm incredibly excited to tell those stories, and tell those stories here. But in terms of, like, there will be a point in the next 5 to 10 years where, if we do everything we do with Dead Rabbit goes well, touch wood, we're most likely going to be somebody's going to come in and take a big chunk of the company, and the company will probably start to go in a slightly different direction. At that stage, I would look to just to do things. I live in New Jersey. My wife and my boys, we have a place in Promise, and her family are heavily based in the summer on the shore. The bar scene in New Jersey, I think, needs a lot of love, and the Irish pub representation in New Jersey is incredibly poor. So I think, if you're asking me beyond 5 to 10 years, I'd most likely like to have an Irish bar in New Jersey proper, and then something on the shore so it could fit around my family life. Because right now I mean, sure you can tell I'm absorbed with everything that we're doing. And I will always be highly, like, I'm not going to be the type that retires, but I want my work to fit more around my life, as opposed to they're going in parallel tracks, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How's your son?
I have a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old son.
Oh, well, yeah. We're close. I got a 3 and a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
My daughter's
So we're
three.
we're both in the trenches then.
It's definitely in the weeds.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I maybe want to ask you is, you gave up drinking like almost a decade ago,
Yeah.
and you're still opening, a lot of these bars. But really, again, I think what we've established is, you're really just sort of telling the story of Irish culture through the medium of drinks at the moment. Are there other mediums that you would do that through?
Yeah. I've got to the point in my life now where I wouldn't say no to. I would have been very rigid in terms of, like, even when I was a cocktail bartender, it was just about cocktails. Like, the customer wasn't part of that thing for me. It was like, I'm making great cocktails, and the customer happens to be the recipient of that, which is just obviously inexperience and naivety and all of that type of stuff. As I've grown up, and as I continue to grow up and evolve and develop, I wouldn't rule anything out. As long as it fits my passion of Ireland, I wouldn't rule anything out. So I don't know what that means, or what it doesn't mean, or how that could go, but I trust in my ability, and I trust in my myself, and I'm a quick learner. I learn quickly and make, like, I trust in myself to go in different directions and stretch my abilities. So I wouldn't say no.
Love it, man. This is great.
Thank you, it was awesome to speak to you.
Yeah, selfishly, I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did as well. But congrats, man, on all the success.
Thank you.
And continue to grow. I know it's also probably incredibly difficult, and you probably have 100 fires to put out. So I'll let you get back to it. But next time you're in the city, I'll drop by. We should say hello.
Bernard, I'd love that.
But thanks, man. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you very much for having me.